Kalpana will be in conversation with Shaila Shah, who is a writer, publisher, and long-time supporter of literati.
I'm Shaila Shah, publisher, writer, and also a feminist. I should make that clear right from the start. But more importantly, here's Kalpana Sharma, who's an independent journalist and author based in Mumbai. In over 4 decades as a journalist, she has specialized in developmental and environmental issues, as well as written on gender. She has worked with Himmat Weekly, Indian Express, The Times of India, and The Hindu. And she was also consulting editor with the Economic and Political Weekly and reader's editor with Scroll In. She's also the author of Rediscovering Dharavi, Stories from Asia's Largest Slum, and has edited Missing, Half the Story, Journalism as if Gender Matters, and co-edited Who's News, The Media and Women's Issues, and Terror, Counter-Terror, Women Speak Out. So here's an anthology, Single by Choice, in which 13 women have written accounts about why they came to be single, what drove them to that decision, and a bit about their very happy and fulfilling lives as single women. Why this book?
Well, I was approached by the publisher. Her name is Ritu Menon, and this is the feminist publishing house called Women Unlimited. And so I think the reason she asked me is A, because I'm a journalist, and B, because I'm single. And when she came to me, she said, I have this idea. Why don't we do a book on, and we'll call it Single by Choice, and ask some women to write for it. And I thought about it, and actually I thought it was quite a good idea, because I had myself, in my own experience, seen that in my discussions, especially with younger women, that more and more of them were questioning this thing of the automatic way in which, in India especially, we finish college and we get married. You know, it's as if there's no pause. It's like a continuum. And many of them were seriously questioning it. So I thought this might be a good time where we look at not just the issue of choice, which as women we should have, when we want to get married, whether we want to get married, and to who we want to get married. But also because this institution of marriage as it remains within Indian society is never fully questioned or discussed, you know. So I thought this may be a way to bring out many of these questions.
Okay, and let's get this next question out of the way before someone else asks it. And that is, why haven't you included men? Why is it just single women and not single anybody?
Well, you know, single men, first of all, write a lot. They write a lot about themselves. So if they wanted, some man wants to do a book on single men, he's welcome to do so. I'm not interested in that. I was more interested in doing something on women, yeah.
Okay. Is this the first such collection by single women?
I think it's the first collection, though there have been books. There was a book, I think 2 years ago, by Sri Moi Undu, in which she had interviewed a lot of single women. And it was called Status Single.
Okay.
And it was based on a lot of interviews with a very big range of single women, yeah.
And how is single being defined in this book?
Well, we discussed that, and we decided we would, because, you know, you can be single, you can be widowed, you can be divorced, deserted, etc. We decided to narrow it down to as in never married, because, you know, statistically, I'm told in the 2011 census, there was some 71 million single women in India. But that included widowed, divorced, deserted, and never married. And then, you know, there's no real estimate of the never married, but the guess says it's about 26 million, which is very small in such a large population. But we discussed this amongst ourselves and decided the never married would be then a much more valid thing, because it would, this thing of choice, you know, whether you want to marry or not would come up if you've actually chosen never to get married. Yeah.
And do you know whether there are any trends to show that this number is increasing or decreasing?
As of now, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody is yet doing any kind of study. So it's all something that, you know, just comes up when you talk to people. Even amongst us women journalists, for instance, we are finding more and more women are single, you know, as in never married. And so if that is, and then I've talked to women in some other professions, you know, who all have said the same thing that many women have written, that you reach your mid-30s, and if by that time you have decided not to get married or you haven't found somebody you want to marry, generally, A, your family leaves you alone, and B, you yourself are enjoying your life so much as an independent person that you don't want to go into a relationship unless it's real value addition to your life. So a lot of women at that juncture actually do make a choice to remain single. So I have a feeling with the fact that women are entering many more professions. They're getting, at least of our class, I mean, I'll say that, some sort of economic independence. Then I think they are in a position to make much more of a choice than even say 10, 15 years earlier, and certainly 40 years earlier. Like my generation did not have that much of a choice as the young women today.
Okay, we'll return to the question about choice and circumstance and how they might kind of blend.
Yeah.
But before that, can you tell us a bit about the contributors? How did you find them? Who are these women? How did you reach out?
Yeah, so much of it was women I knew or the publisher knew. Then by word of mouth, one heard of some other interesting women, but it's a very awkward thing if you're the editor of a volume like this. I mean, how do you write to somebody and say, I'm putting together this volume, but can you tell me first whether you're single as in never married? So, so one had to find other ways of discovering whether the person we had thought of. And I wanted to try and get a bit of a range, so that it's not only people like us. So that meant, in a way, spreading the net and finding out. So most of this is by word of mouth. I had actually written to about 25 women, and I was hoping I would get at least 20 of them. 25 actually agreed, but only 12 delivered, and then me, 13. So I think what happened with most of them was, even though they agreed initially and thought it was a great idea, when you actually sit down to write something like this, it's so personal. And most of us don't spend our time navel gazing, we're getting on with our lives. But when you write this, it not only is it personal, but it also implicates other people. And you're not sure you want to do it publicly. So that is the reason some even started writing and then pulled back, So I guess that's inevitable. I was hoping it would not happen, but now when I think about it, I'm actually amazed that 12 agreed, and they're all, some of them are fairly prominent, and they were prepared to, go on record and write. Yeah.
So I'm going to read out a couple of kind of statements that contributors have made in this book about singledom and being single. So Sujata Patel has said, why is it that being single is thought to be so unusual, and why is it a choice that questions the system? Why is it seen to be a decision that lets us take the first steps to achievement and empowerment, and is therefore a dangerous act for a girl? Why does this feat need a specific explanation and, depending on one's ideology, generate positive or negative feelings, whereas being married is thought to be natural? So that's a very interesting question that Sujata has raised. And then Asmita Basu makes the point that in most relationships, gender roles continue unquestioned, and that a single woman, by her very existence, poses a challenge.
Yeah.
So can you expand on that a bit more, and about how singledom is regarded in India, how it's come over from the contributors in the book?
Yeah, I mean, from my own experience, I'll tell you this, that because I chose at certain point to remain single, that there are various members of my family who were seriously worried that I would influence their daughters, for instance, by being a feminist and B, a single professional. And so I think that kind of worry is there, that, to see a single woman being happy and settled is unsettling for some. And in fact, I have the story about an editor of a newspaper I will not name, which is a very well-known newspaper for which I worked. And when I went for the interview with this editor, he sort of politely asked me, so who is there at home? So I said, my father. So then he looks at me and he says, oh, you're not settled? I said, excuse me, I am extremely settled, But this is the sort of, I think he realized that I'm single, which hadn't occurred to him. And I think this is a very traditional newspaper. So they hired me nonetheless, and at a good position. But yeah, so I think it's as I said, because it's so automatic. All of us have grown up believing somehow that you have to get married, and that's the culmination of everything in your life, is to find the right person, get married, and live happily ever after. We all, as little girls, also are brought up with that dream. We play with dolls, which also it's about house, and making your little house, etc. And I think that's why I think it, we seem like, these transgressors and people who are just breaking that smooth course that has been laid out for our lives. So I think, so I think it is disturbing for a lot of people. They can't understand. And of course, as Sujata says, that quite often it is, so what happened? So it's like, what do you mean, what happened? I mean, why are you not married? So I said, I can turn around and say, why are you married? So, but this is the thinking, that there must be either something wrong with you or something wrong with the person you almost married. It can't just be that you can actually, as a human being, decide that this is the way you want to live your life.
I said we'd return to the question of choice and
Yeah.
circumstance, because with some of the contributors seemed like there were circumstances that then led to the choice
Yes.
to be single. And also, there will be circumstances that just make it easier for women to do that. So can you say a bit more about that? Because
Yeah. So one of the essays I'll draw attention to is, which I think is this sort of outlier, because as I said, most of the other women who've contributed to this are professional, urban-based, middle class, or one of them is at upper middle class. But the outlier is this woman called Bama. She's a Tamil writer, but her books are also being translated into English. She's quite brilliant. She's also a Dalit. So this combination of being a Dalit and a woman she brings it out very, very. Her essay is truly a searing essay, because it shows the way society looks not only at a woman who is single, and in her case it's in a small town, so it's not in this westernized metropolitan city where she first goes to a nunnery. She's a Dalit Christian, and then leaves it because that's not the life she wants for herself. But she decides that she will remain single, and she can't rent a house. She finds it difficult to rent a house because she's a single woman. Finally, she has a plot of land and she decides to build a house there for herself. And all the women in the village keep saying, but why does she need a house? She's single. And then she describes, in great honesty, the kind of challenges she faces, where there's always speculation about her sexual life. Nobody comes to help her when she's very ill. And at one point, when she has to go off and have a hysterectomy, she goes to Chennai, has it, and comes back. These women think she went out to get an abortion. Because again, the stories about how can a single woman, live without being promiscuous and having, and then she's trying to hide it, and therefore, to the point that these women actually wanted to inspect her scar because they wouldn't believe that she actually had an operation. I'm telling you, when you read it, you can't believe. And yet, this is the woman who, at the end of it, she says, I'm still very happy I made that choice. Whatever it is, I have my space, I can do whatever I want in my own house. And so she became economically independent, of course, but even that was not enough. It was not enough because this is a combination of this conservative milieu in which she lived and being a Dalit also, which added another dimension to that of being a single woman.
so class and caste can be quite inhibiting factors to
Yes.
being able to exercise the choice.
Yeah.
And it really only comes out in her piece, because almost everyone else
Yeah.
has got economic independence, is from an upper middle class or professional background,
Yeah.
and is therefore kind of in a situation from which it is much easier to exercise the choice.
Yeah, but a couple of them have written about other women. For instance, Freni Manik Shah is a journalist who has done a lot of work in Kashmir and also in Chhattisgarh. But she also writes about the woman who works in a house in Bombay, a Maharashtrian woman, who is single, and talks about the challenges she faced. And similarly, there's a remarkable young woman called Aheli Moitra, who chose to go and work in Nagaland, and she's from Bombay, so you'd think, Nagaland, her parents must have wondered how on earth and why. She's also a journalist. She decided to work with a newspaper there called Morung Express, and she described going to Dimapur and as a single woman from India, because, in the northeast, we are the mainland, and they consider us from somewhere else. She had to find a place to live, but then in the course of her living there, she got to know many single women, Naga women, and she writes about them and how in this traditional Naga society, which in many ways is far more progressive than many of our societies, uh, women cannot inherit land. So as a result, and there are certain things they don't want women to do. So there's one woman, for instance, who works with other Naga women in making them economically independent. But a woman is never supposed to hold a dao. A dao is like a thing in which they cut grass, and you can also kill somebody with it because it's like a big knife. But a woman is not supposed to handle it. So these kind of traditions, these women who are single, who are Naga, who still live embedded in their own cultures, are attempting to break. So it's quite interesting. I mean, there's obviously many more books and many more stories that have to be unearthed, and hoping that this would provoke that kind of greater investigation into many more parts of India and many more types of people in India and women in India who are making these choices.
Okay. On a more general level, and the point is made by many of the contributors, the terminology that's used to describe single women is often kind of pejorative and demeaning,
Yeah.
spinster, left on the shelf, selfish,
Yeah.
and so on. How can we start changing the language around this?
It's difficult because first of all, it's in English, and in Hindi and in other languages also there are many terms that are used. I think single women must assert what they want to be called, and even single is disputed. Being a single woman. What is it? Emma Watson came up with something about. Can you?
Self-partnered, consciously
Self-part-
self-partnered or something.
Consciously self-partnered. So I strung that past some of the people who've written, and that many of them didn't like it either. And in fact, one alternative title I had suggested, which half liked and half didn't like, was single-minded women. Because I thought that was better. But anyway, single by choice, one by majority. So, but frankly, I don't care. I know some people mind it, but I don't care what they call you. I think it is who you are that you have to get across to people, So I think the more people see that it's not marriage that defines you as a woman, but who you are and what you stand for and what you do with your life, the more of us who convey that, whether married or single, I think that will start changing people's perceptions.
That's true, and I think this book has made a very important contribution in just recognizing single women and their place in society. What else do you think, what else do you hope the book will achieve going forwards?
One thing I made a real attempt to do was to get a range of ages. So, we have Laila Tayebji, who is very well known in India as a person who's done a lot of work with the craftspeople, and she set up something called Dastakar, and she agreed to write, and she's 72. To the youngest, who is 26, or was 26 when she sent her essay, she's now 28, who's a journalist, and she was the last to deliver. I was willing to let her get, I said, if you really can't do it, just let me know. And she wrote back she said, no, I want to write it. So I said, but you may not be sure, you're only 26. She said, no, I've thought this through very clearly. And maybe in 10 years' time, I'll read this essay and think, oh gosh, how did I write this? But at this particular point in my life, this is what I believe in. And so there are one or two, especially of the younger ones, who are ambivalent, and which I think is completely understandable. But there are many, including, the other outstanding essay in this is by the best sports journalist in India, who's also a woman. Her name is Sharda Ugra, who was my colleague in the Hindu for a short while when we overlapped. Her essay is totally delightful. Not only did she break ground by being a sports journalist, because not many women covered sport at that time. And in the Hindu, for instance, when she joined, there was nobody else on the sports desk. There was no other woman. There were only men. So the editors couldn't figure out what to give Sharda to cover. So she wanted to cover cricket, obviously. In India, everybody wants to cover cricket. And they said, no, cricket had the old veterans who were covering it. So finally, she badgered them so much that for the World Cup, they sent her to cover a match in Pune where West Indies were playing Kenya. And it was one of those, West Indies will win anyway. And it was one of those huge upsets when Kenya won. So Sharda got onto the front page of the Hindu with a cricket story. And that is the beginning of her thing. But what is delightful about her thing is again her honesty and the way she talks about, you know, the way she went through this whole process. And the funniest thing I think is when she was at the Hindu, she decided to take a bank loan and buy an apartment in Bombay. And she says one of her colleagues, another sports journalist, a male, obviously, because there were like 3 women who were in sports, came to her house and he was shocked. He said, "Oh my gosh." So she said, "Why? Something wrong?" He said, "I never thought you could live like this." And she said, "What do you mean how you live like this?" Because there's a stereotype. She's a single woman. She must be literally slumming it. You know, there'd be clothes all over the place. It'd be a mess. And this is like a properly organized house with everything in place, a kitchen, clean, and so on. Yeah.
Before we move to any questions about this, would you like to read an extract?
Actually, there's so many fun pieces. I think as I've talked about Sharda, let me read about just the beginning of her essay because I think it's great fun. So this is how she starts. As much as the fact hovers between corny and cliched, this piece cannot be written without cricket. Cricketers, actually. They are part of my life story as a singleton, bachelor, girl, spinster. The story is not about how I found 1 or 2 or 3 cricketers compellingly attractive and how they turned out to be heels and broke my heart, and that is why I'm single, not even close. It is more about how cricket and cricketers first made me process the idea of singlehood and then understand how the outside world deals with it. When Kalpana asked me to write about being single, what's the word here? Deliberately, purposefully, purposely, stubbornly, and I began to work through memories. Cricket and cricketers kept showing up. I remember precisely the first and only time my father asked me the "what are you planning to do with your life" question. Code for Shadi talk. It was November 26, 1995, just around noon. I just turned 27. My dad was driving us somewhere for Sunday lunch. There is a reason I remember the date and time, but not where we were going. Cricket commentary was on the radio. India were playing New Zealand in a one-day match in Nagpur, and this madcap Kiwi batsman had pulverized our bowling. On Mumbai's Eastern Express Highway, just after Nathan Assel completes his debut ODI century, my dad throws a hand grenade into the backseat. It took a while to explode because my reply was about applying for a journalism fellowship and traveling a bit, after which the M word detonated good and proper. With Astley just having completed his Assel, I think, just having completed his century, India being well and truly stuffed, the coolest parents in the world, and they remain so, led me into an ambush. Naturally, everything that followed the question meant that Assel's 100 was seared onto my mind forever. The matter did sort itself out within a few months, more on that later, but the sheer incongruity of staying optionally single, unmarried, unhitched was noted.